The dust cloud from the departing stagecoach settled around Katherine Norwood's worn boots as she stood in the center of Riverside, Montana, clutching a carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world, which was not much at all. The year was 1876, and Katherine had traveled over 2,000 miles from Philadelphia with promises of marriage, only to discover upon her arrival that the man who had corresponded with her for 6 months had married another woman just 3 weeks prior. The letter explaining this unfortunate development had apparently been lost in the mail, leaving Katherine to step off the stagecoach expecting a wedding and instead finding nothing but humiliation and the pitying stares of strangers who had gathered to witness what should have been a joyful reunion. The man himself, Gerald Patterson, had at least possessed enough decency to meet her at the stage office with his new bride hanging on his arm like a trophy, apologizing profusely while his wife looked Katherine up and down with barely concealed smugness. He offered her money for a return ticket, which Katherine refused with what little dignity she could muster. She would not go back to Philadelphia, where her stepmother had made it clear there was no place for her anymore, not after she had sold most of Katherine's late mother's belongings to fund this disastrous journey west. So there she stood, 22 years old, alone, and feeling more rejected than she had ever felt in her entire life. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the main street of Riverside, a growing town situated along the Yellowstone River that served as a supply hub for ranchers and miners in the surrounding territory. Buildings lined both sides of the wide dirt road: a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith, a livery stable, and various other establishments that catered to the rough men who made their living in this untamed land. Katherine forced herself to move, putting one foot in front of the other toward the hotel. She had enough money for perhaps a week's lodging if she was careful, and then she would need to figure out how to survive. Her stomach churned with anxiety, but she refused to let tears fall where anyone could see them. She had cried enough on the stagecoach journey, pressed against the window while the landscape transformed from green farmland to endless prairie to these rugged mountains. The hotel clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, took in Katherine's situation with a single knowing glance. "You are that mail-order bride Gerald stood up, are you not?" she asked, her voice gentler than her words. Katherine nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "Men can be fools," the woman said matter-of-factly. "I am Mrs. Dalton. I run this establishment with my husband. The room is $2 a week, meals included if you eat in the dining room. But if you are looking for work, I could use help with the laundry and cleaning, room and board plus a small wage." The relief that flooded through Katherine was so intense she nearly stumbled. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, thank you. I would be grateful for the work, Mrs." Dalton's expression softened further. "You are not the first woman to arrive here with broken promises, and you will not be the last. But Riverside is a good town, better than most out here. You will find your footing." Katherine wanted to believe her, but as she followed Mrs. Dalton up the narrow stairs to a small room at the back of the hotel, she could not shake the feeling that her life had become completely unmoored. Everything she had hoped for, everything she had planned, had disintegrated in the space of 5 terrible minutes. The room was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small window that looked out over the alley behind the hotel. Katherine set down her carpetbag and sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her circumstances. She had no family to return to, no prospects, and no real skills beyond basic housekeeping, and the piano lessons her mother had insisted upon years ago, which seemed utterly useless now. A knock on the door startled her. Mrs. Dalton stood in the hallway with a tray. "I brought you some supper. You look half-starved. Eat, rest, and we will talk about your duties in the morning." "Thank you," Katherine whispered, taking the tray with hands that shook slightly. The simple kindness nearly undid her completely. That night, Katherine lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the sounds of the town. Horses passing on the street below, music and laughter from the saloon, the distant howl of a coyote. She had never felt so alone in her life, but somewhere beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small spark of determination began to kindle. She had survived her father's death when she was 15, survived her stepmother's coldness, survived the grueling journey west. She would survive this too, somehow. The next morning, Katherine woke before dawn and dressed in her plainest dress, pinning her dark hair back severely. She found Mrs. Dalton already at work in the kitchen behind the dining room, preparing breakfast for the hotel guests. "Good you are awake," Mrs. Dalton said, looking up from the biscuits she was forming. "Can you cook?" "Some," Katherine admitted. "My mother taught me the basics before she passed." "That will do. We feed about 20 people most mornings, more when the ranch hands come in on Saturdays. Today you can help me here, and then this afternoon I will show you the laundry." Katherine threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction. She helped prepare eggs, bacon, and biscuits, then served the hotel guests in the dining room. Most were men, rough-looking cowboys and miners who ate quickly and left. A few tipped their hats politely to her, while others stared with open curiosity. She ignored them all, focusing on her tasks. It was during the second breakfast service, around 8 o'clock when the late risers came down, that Katherine first saw Nathan Riley. He sat alone at a corner table, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore worn jeans, a faded blue shirt and a leather vest, with a bandana tied loosely around his neck. What struck Katherine most was not his appearance, though he was handsome in a rugged way, but the profound loneliness that seemed to emanate from him like heat from a stove. He sat with his shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller, and when he looked up to order, his eyes, a striking shade of hazel green, held a sadness that Katherine recognized immediately because she saw the same thing in her own mirror. "Coffee and whatever you are serving," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. Katherine poured his coffee and brought him a plate of eggs and biscuits, aware of his gaze following her movements. Unlike the other men, there was nothing predatory or presumptuous in his attention. If anything, he seemed almost shy, quickly looking away when she met his eyes. Over the next few days, Katherine settled into a routine at the hotel. She worked from dawn until evening, helping with cooking, serving, cleaning rooms, and doing mountains of laundry in the wash house out back. The work was exhausting, but it kept her mind occupied and gave her a sense of purpose. Mrs. Dalton was a fair employer, and the other hotel workers, a young girl named Emma who helped with dishes and an older man named Joseph who handled maintenance, were friendly enough. Nathan Riley, Katherine learned through listening to the other guests, owned a small ranch about 10 miles outside of town. He came to Riverside every week or so for supplies, and apparently always stayed one night at the hotel rather than making the long ride back after dark. He was unfailingly polite, always quiet, and kept to himself in a way that made the other cowboys regard him with a mixture of respect and puzzlement. "Strange fellow, that Riley," Katherine overheard one ranch hand say to another. "Good with horses, pays his debts, but never joins us at the saloon. Lives out there all alone like some kind of hermit. Heard his family all died some years back," the other man replied. "Fever or something. Been on his own ever since." Katherine felt a pang of sympathy. So they had both lost people, both ended up alone in their own ways. She found herself noticing Nathan more after that. The way he seemed most comfortable with his horse, a beautiful black mare he kept at the livery, than with people. The way he always said please and thank you in that soft voice. The way his hands, calloused and strong, handled everything with surprising gentleness, whether it was his coffee cup or the worn hat he hung on the chair beside him. It was 2 weeks after Katherine's arrival in Riverside when their first real conversation happened. She was taking a rare break, sitting on the back steps of the hotel with a cup of tea when Nathan came around the corner leading his horse. He stopped when he saw her, looking uncertain. "Sorry, I did not mean to disturb you," he said. "You are not," Katherine replied. "I am just resting for a moment." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. He began to lead his horse past, but then stopped again. "You are the woman who came for Gerald Patterson, are you not?" Katherine stiffened, the familiar shame flooding through her. "I am." "I am sorry that happened to you," Nathan said simply. That was not right, what he did. The genuine kindness in his voice made Katherine's eyes sting with unexpected tears. Most people in town treated her with either pity or knowing looks, as if she had somehow been foolish to trust a man's written promises. But Nathan's words held no judgment, only compassion. "Thank you," she managed. "I suppose I should have known better than to come all this way for a stranger." "You were brave to try," Nathan said, still standing there with his horse's reins in his hand. "It takes courage to start over somewhere new. Or desperation," Katherine said with a bitter laugh. "Sometimes those are the same thing." Nathan shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation but unwilling to simply walk away. "Are you settling in all right? Mrs. Dalton treating you fairly? She has been very kind. I do not know what I would have done without her offer of work." Nathan nodded slowly. "Good." "That is good." Another pause. "Well, I should get Belle here to the stable. I hope your day goes well, Miss Norwood, Katherine Norwood, Miss Norwood." He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture that seemed old-fashioned even in this time and place, and led his horse away. Katherine watched him go, feeling oddly lighter than she had moments before. It was such a small interaction, barely worth noting, and yet Nathan's simple kindness and lack of judgment had touched something deep inside her. For the first time since arriving in Riverside, she felt like perhaps she was not completely invisible, not just the object of pitying gossip. The following week, Nathan appeared at breakfast again. This time, when Katherine brought his coffee, he looked up and said, "Good morning, Miss Norwood." "Good morning, Mr. Riley," she replied, pleased that he had remembered her name. "Just Nathan, please," he said. "Mr. Riley was my father." "Then I am Katherine." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, transforming his features in a way that made Katherine's breath catch slightly. He had a good smile, warm and genuine, even though it appeared so rarely. "Katherine," he repeated as if trying out the sound of it. "That is a nice name." It became their pattern. Each time Nathan came to town, he would greet Katherine by name and she would do the same. Their conversations remained brief, nothing that could be called improper, but there was a growing ease between them. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, to the quiet steadiness of his presence that was so different from the boisterous energy of the other men who passed through the hotel. One afternoon in late July, nearly a month after Katherine's arrival, she was hanging laundry in the yard behind the hotel when she heard raised voices from the street. Concerned, she set down her basket and walked around to the front, where a small crowd had gathered. Gerald Patterson stood in the middle of the street, swaying slightly. Even from a distance, Katherine could smell the whiskey on him. His wife stood on the boardwalk in front of the general store, her face tight with embarrassment and anger. "You are making a fool of yourself," the wife hissed. "Get home before the whole town sees you like this." "The whole town already knows what a fool I am," Gerald slurred. "Married the wrong woman, did I not? Should have waited for her." He gestured wildly in the direction of the hotel, though Katherine doubted he could actually see her in the shadows. Katherine's face burned with humiliation. People were staring, whispering. This was exactly the kind of attention she had been trying to avoid. "That is enough." Nathan's voice cut through the commotion, quiet but commanding. He had apparently just ridden into town and was still mounted on his black mare. He dismounted smoothly and walked toward Gerald with calm, purposeful strides. "You are drunk, Patterson. Go home and sleep it off." "Who asked you, Riley?" Gerald sneered. "This is none of your business." "You are making it the business of everyone on this street," Nathan replied evenly. "And you are embarrassing that woman over there who does not deserve it." He did not gesture toward Katherine, but everyone knew who he meant. Gerald took a stumbling step toward Nathan, his fists clenched. "You protecting her? Maybe you want her for yourself, is that it?" Nathan did not rise to the bait. "I am protecting the peace of this town. Now go home." For a moment it seemed like Gerald might actually throw a punch, but Nathan simply stood there, utterly calm, his hands relaxed at his sides. Something in his stillness, his complete lack of fear, seemed to deflate Gerald's drunken bravado. The other man turned and stumbled away, his wife hurrying after him with her head down. The crowd began to disperse, the excitement over. Nathan glanced toward the hotel, his eyes finding Katherine's. Even from across the street, she could see the concern in his expression. He started to move toward her, but Katherine turned and fled back to the laundry yard, mortified beyond bearing. She scrubbed its sheets with unnecessary vigor, trying to push down the shame and anger roiling inside her. It was not fair. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was the one left feeling exposed and humiliated. And now Nathan had witnessed it, had felt compelled to defend her as if she were some helpless creature who could not handle herself. "Katherine." His voice came from behind her, gentle and tentative. She did not turn around, keeping her hands busy with the laundry. "You should not have involved yourself. It will only fuel more gossip." "I do not care about gossip." "Well, I do. I have to live here." She heard him step closer. "I am sorry. I did not mean to make things worse. I just could not stand there and let him speak of you that way." The sincerity in his voice made Katherine's eyes sting. She finally turned to face him, finding him standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. "Why do you care?" she asked. "You barely know me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers working the brim of his hat. "I know what it feels like to be alone," he said finally. "To feel like the whole world has turned its back on you. I would not wish that feeling on anyone, especially not someone who has already been treated unfairly." Katherine felt something crack open inside her chest. "You are the first person here who has treated me like I am more than just a scandal or an object of pity." "You are more," Nathan said firmly. "You are someone who had the courage to cross a continent for the promise of something better. You are someone who holds her head high even when others would have crumbled. You are someone worth knowing." The tears Katherine had been holding back finally spilled over. She turned away quickly, embarrassed, but Nathan stepped forward and gently touched her shoulder. "Please do not cry," he said softly. "I cannot bear it." Katherine laughed through her tears, a choked sound. "I am sorry. I am not usually this emotional. You have every right to be." Nathan pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. "Here." Katherine took it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes. They stood in the afternoon sun, laundry flapping on the line around them, and something shifted between them. It was as if they had crossed some invisible threshold, moving from polite acquaintances to something more, though neither could have named exactly what. "Thank you," Katherine said finally, "for what you did out there and for this." She held up the handkerchief. "You can keep it," Nathan said. "I should get going. I need to pick up supplies before the store closes." "Nathan," Katherine called as he turned to leave. He looked back. "Would you like to have coffee with me sometime? Not in the dining room with everyone watching, I mean. Maybe out here or somewhere quiet." Nathan's face lit up with that rare smile again. "I would like that very much." 2 days later, Katherine prepared a basket with coffee, sandwiches, and some of Mrs. Dalton's excellent apple pie. Nathan had said he would come by after he finished his business in town, around 4 in the afternoon. Katherine found herself nervous in a way she had not expected, checking her reflection multiple times, smoothing her dress, tucking stray hairs back into place. "You look lovely," Mrs. Dalton said, catching her in the hallway. The older woman's eyes twinkled with knowing amusement. "Nathan Riley is a good man, quiet, keeps to himself, but good." "We are just having coffee," Katherine protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "Of course you are, dear." Mrs. Dalton patted her arm. "Take the rest of the afternoon. You have been working yourself to the bone. You deserve some time off." Katherine wanted to argue, but Mrs. Dalton shooed her away. So when Nathan arrived, leading his horse on foot, Katherine was ready. She had suggested they walk down to the river, where there was a spot under some cottonwood trees that provided shade and privacy. Nathan carried the basket without being asked, and they walked in companionable silence through the edge of town toward the water. The Yellowstone River ran wide and lazy here in summer, its banks lined with willows and cottonwoods. Birds called from the branches, and the sound of the water was soothing. They settled on a flat rock near the shore, and Katherine poured coffee from the tin pot she had packed, still warm from the hotel kitchen. Nathan accepted his cup with a quiet thank you and took a sip. "This is nice," he said, looking out over the water. "Peaceful." "You get much peace at your ranch?" Katherine asked. Nathan considered this. "In some ways it is quiet, certainly, but there is always work to be done. Fences to mend, animals to tend, buildings to maintain. It is easier to ignore loneliness when you are busy." Katherine understood that completely. "Is that why you work so hard at the hotel? To stay busy?" "Partially, but also because I need the job." She hesitated, then added, "I write letters in the evenings to other towns inquiring about positions. Teaching, if possible, or governess work. I took some teaching courses back in Philadelphia." Nathan's expression shifted slightly, something that might have been disappointment flickering across his face. "You are planning to leave Riverside?" "I do not know," Katherine admitted. "I suppose I am keeping my options open. This was never meant to be my destination, after all. I came here for a specific purpose, and that purpose no longer exists." "But you could build a new purpose here," Nathan said carefully, "if you wanted to." Katherine met his eyes, seeing hope and vulnerability there that made her heart ache. "Is that what you did?" "Built a new purpose after losing your family." Nathan looked away, his jaw tightening. "I am not sure I have succeeded at that. Mostly I just exist. The ranch keeps me alive, but I would not say I have much purpose beyond survival." "That sounds lonely." "It is." Nathan took a breath. "I have been alone for 4 years now. After my parents and sister died of fever, I thought perhaps the loneliness would ease with time, but it has not. If anything, it has gotten worse. You forget how to be around people, forget how to connect. And then you wake up one day and realize you have become invisible, just another solitary figure in the landscape." Katherine reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the rock between them. "You are not invisible to me." Nathan turned his hand over, his fingers closing gently around hers. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. "You are not invisible to me either," he said. "From the first moment I saw you in the dining room, I saw you. Maybe because I recognized something of myself in your eyes, that same lost quality. But I saw you, Katherine." They sat holding hands by the river, and Katherine felt something bloom inside her chest, tentative and fragile as a new seedling but unmistakably there. She had come to Riverside expecting to marry one man, a stranger she knew only through letters, thinking that would solve all her problems and give her life direction. But now, sitting with Nathan, she wondered if perhaps fate had brought her here for an entirely different reason. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, not wanting the conversation to end, not wanting to let go of his hand. Nathan's face softened as he spoke about his land. 75 acres of decent grazing land with a creek running through it, a small herd of cattle, some chickens, and his horses. His pride in it was evident, though tempered with the overwhelming nature of managing it alone. "I could use help," he admitted. "Could probably afford to hire a hand, but I've grown so accustomed to solitude that the thought of having someone else around all the time makes me nervous." "I understand that," Katherine said. "After my father died and I had to live with my stepmother, I used to dream of having my own place, somewhere I could be alone and not have to endure her constant criticism. But now that I have experienced real aloneness, I realize it is not what I wanted at all. I just wanted to be somewhere I was valued." "You are valued," Nathan said with quiet intensity. "Maybe not by everyone in this town, but by Mrs. Dalton from what I have observed, and by me." Katherine squeezed his hand. "That means more than you know." They talked until the sun began to sink lower in the sky, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Nathan told her about growing up in Missouri, how his family had moved to Montana when he was 18 seeking new opportunities. Katherine shared stories of her childhood in Philadelphia, her father's work as a clerk, her mother's love of music, and how she had taught Katherine to play piano. "There is a piano in the hotel parlor," Nathan said. "I have never heard anyone play it." "It is terribly out of tune," Katherine replied, "but sometimes, late at night when everyone is asleep, I go down and play quietly. It reminds me of my mother." "I would like to hear you play sometime," Nathan said, "if you would be willing. I would like that." As they walked back to town, Nathan carrying the empty basket, Katherine felt lighter than she had in months. They parted at the hotel with promises to see each other again soon, and Katherine went to bed that night with a smile on her face, Nathan's handkerchief tucked under her pillow. Over the next several weeks, Nathan found more reasons to come to town. He never stayed at the hotel on these extra trips, riding back to his ranch the same day, but he always made time to see Katherine. They took walks along the river, shared meals, and talked about everything and nothing. Katherine learned that Nathan had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, that he loved to read but had few books at the ranch, that he could whittle beautiful small animals from scraps of wood. Nathan learned that Katherine had a talent for storytelling, that she missed the culture of the city but loved the wild beauty of Montana, that she had a stubborn streak a mile wide beneath her polite exterior. The people of Riverside began to notice their growing friendship. Some smiled approvingly, happy to see two lonely souls finding comfort in each other. Others gossiped, speculating about whether Nathan would propose, whether Katherine was already setting her cap for another man after the Gerald Patterson disaster. Gerald himself had apparently left town with his wife, heading to California where his wife's family lived. The gossip said the marriage was already in trouble, which gave Katherine no satisfaction. She felt only relief that she would not have to see him around town anymore. One evening in late August, Nathan arrived at the hotel looking determined. He found Katherine in the parlor dusting furniture and asked if she would come sit with him. "I have been thinking," he began, then stopped, clearly struggling with his words. They sat on the worn sofa, Katherine waiting patiently for him to continue. "I am not good at this. I have never been good with words, not like you are, but I need to say something, and I am asking you to hear me out before you respond." "All right," Katherine said, her heart beginning to beat faster. Nathan took a deep breath. "These past weeks with you have been the happiest I have known in years. When I am with you, I do not feel lonely anymore. The world seems less heavy, less hard. I find myself thinking about you constantly, wondering what you are doing, looking forward to when I will see you next. And I hope, that perhaps you feel some of the same." "I do," Katherine whispered, Nathan's face flooded with relief. He reached for her hands, holding them carefully as if they were precious. "I know I do not have much to offer. My ranch is small, the work is hard, and I am not wealthy by any means. But I would spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make you happy if you would let me." "Katherine, I have fallen in love with you." Tears sprang to Katherine's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "I have fallen in love with you too. You make me feel chosen, Nathan. After feeling rejected and worthless, you make me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Nathan said fiercely. "You matter more than anything." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Katherine did not pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was tender and sweet and full of promise. It was Katherine's first real kiss, and she felt it all the way down to her toes, a warmth spreading through her entire body. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for 2 months, but I am certain of this. I am certain of you." Katherine laughed, the sound bright with happiness. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Katherine felt something settle into place inside her. This was what she had traveled across the country seeking, not the empty promise of a stranger, but this genuine connection, this real love with a man who saw her, truly saw her, and chose her anyway. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Riverside. Mrs. Dalton cried and insisted on hosting a dinner for them at the hotel. The whole town turned out, curious to witness the mail-order bride who had been rejected finally getting her happy ending with the lonely cowboy who had come out of his shell for love. Katherine wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Dalton helped her make, and Nathan wore his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly trimmed, his face shining with such open happiness that several women in the congregation teared up at the sight. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Katherine with a gentleness that spoke of reverence and barely restrained passion, and Katherine kissed him back with all the love in her heart. That evening, Nathan brought Katherine home to his ranch for the first time as his wife. The ride took nearly 2 hours, following the river valley and then up into rolling hills dotted with cattle. The ranch house came into view as the sun was setting, a simple cabin made of logs with a stone chimney and a wide porch. It was not grand, but it was solid and well built, surrounded by a barn, chicken coop, and corrals. Nathan helped Katherine down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "Tradition," he said with a shy smile, carrying her over the threshold. Inside, the cabin was cleaner than Katherine had expected, with one large main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom beyond, and a small loft accessible by a ladder. The furniture was simple but well made, probably by Nathan's own hands. A lantern burned on the table, which Nathan must have arranged before he left that morning. "It is not much," Nathan said, setting Katherine down gently. "But it is ours now." "It is perfect," Katherine replied, meaning it. She looked around at what was now her home, feeling a sense of rightness she had never experienced before. "Show me everything." Nathan gave her a tour, pointing out where things were kept, explaining his routines. In the bedroom, Katherine noticed a new quilt on the bed, the stitching neat and careful. "Mrs. Dalton made that for us," Nathan explained. "As a wedding gift. She brought it by the ranch last week when you were busy with the laundry." Katherine traced the pattern with her fingers, touched by the kindness. Then she turned to Nathan, suddenly nervous. They had not been alone like this before, not truly alone with the knowledge that they would share this bed, this life, everything. Nathan seemed to sense her nervousness. He crossed to her slowly, taking her hands. "We do not have to rush anything," he said gently. "I am happy just to hold you, to wake up next to you tomorrow morning. Everything else can happen in its own time." But Katherine shook her head. "I am not afraid," she said. "Not with you. I trust you, Nathan." What happened between them that night was tender and sweet, a gentle discovery of each other. Nathan was patient and careful, making sure Katherine felt safe and cherished. And Katherine, who had spent so long feeling unwanted, finally understood what it meant to be desired, to be loved with such complete devotion. They came together in the lamplight, learning each other's bodies, whispering words of love and need, creating a bond that went beyond the physical into something that felt almost sacred. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Nathan's arms wrapped around Katherine, her head on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and she had never felt more content. "I love you," Nathan murmured into her hair. "I love you too," Katherine replied. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for choosing me back," Nathan said. "I never thought I would have this. A wife, a partner, someone to share my life with. I had resigned myself to being alone." "You will never be alone again," Katherine promised. "We belong to each other now." Life on the ranch was harder than Katherine had anticipated, but also more rewarding. She woke before dawn to help Nathan with chores, learning to milk cows, feed chickens, tend the garden Nathan had planted but rarely had time to maintain properly. Her hands, soft from her city upbringing, quickly developed calluses. Her skin, pale from working indoors at the hotel, tanned from hours in the sun. Nathan taught her to ride, patient as always, and Katherine discovered she loved the freedom of galloping across open land with the wind in her hair. She taught Nathan her favorite songs, and sometimes in the evenings, they would sing together while doing dishes or mending clothes. She read to him from the few books he owned, and he promised to order more from the catalog next time they went to town. They went to Riverside once a month for supplies, and to visit Mrs. Dalton, who was delighted to see them so obviously happy together. Other people in town, seeing them walk hand in hand down the street, began to soften their opinions of Katherine, accepting her as Nathan's wife rather than the scandalous rejected mail-order bride. The work was constant and challenging. Nathan had been right about needing help, and with Katherine there, they managed to accomplish more. She took over the house completely, as well as the garden and chickens, freeing Nathan to focus on the cattle and horses. They fell into an easy partnership, each trusting the other's competence, working side by side when needed. But more than the work, what filled their days was love. Nathan showed his affection in countless small ways, bringing Katherine wildflowers he found while checking fences, saving the best pieces of meat for her plate, holding her close at night and telling her she was beautiful. Katherine showed her love by packing special treats in his lunch, mending his clothes with care, greeting him with kisses when he came in from the fields. Their physical relationship deepened and grew, becoming easier and more passionate as they learned what pleased each other. Nathan worshipped Catherine's body with his hands and mouth, making her feel like the most desirable woman alive. Katherine discovered her own power to make Nathan lose control, to turn her quiet, reserved husband into someone who gasped her name like a prayer. One night in late October, as they lay together after making love, Nathan's hand resting on Catherine's stomach, she took a deep breath and said, "I think I might be with child." Nathan went very still. Then he raised himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with wonder. "Truly, I cannot be certain yet, but my courses are late and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings." Katherine searched his face anxiously. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy," Nathan's voice broke. "Katherine, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." He bent and kissed her stomach through her nightgown. "A baby, our baby." Katherine ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes filling with tears. "I know we have only been married a few months. Perhaps it is too soon." "It is perfect timing," Nathan said firmly. "Everything about us has been unconventional from the start. Why should this be any different?" As autumn turned to winter, Catherine's pregnancy became undeniable. Her belly began to swell, and the morning sickness passed, replaced by a ravenous appetite and the strange cravings that amused Nathan to no end. He was endlessly solicitous, insisting she rest more, taking on tasks she usually handled without complaint. The winter was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes trapped them in the cabin for days at a time. But those days were not lonely or boring. Nathan taught Katherine to play cards, and she beat him more often than not, which he pretended to be annoyed about. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their childhoods, dreams for the future, plans for the baby. Nathan began building a cradle in the barn workshop, working on it secretly until he could present it to Katherine as a surprise. When he finally brought it in, beautifully crafted from smooth pine with rockers that moved silently, Katherine cried. "It is perfect," she said, running her hands over the wood. "Our baby will sleep so safely here." "I want to build our child everything," Nathan said. "A good life, full of love and security. Everything I lost when my own family died, I want to give to our children." "Children," Katherine teased. "How many are you planning?" Nathan grinned, pulling her carefully into his arms. "As many as you are willing to give me. I want this house to be full of noise and laughter and life." As winter gave way to spring, Katherine grew larger and more uncomfortable. Nathan worried constantly, insisting they go to Riverside more often so the doctor could check on her. Dr. Morrison, an elderly man who had been practicing medicine in Montana since the territory opened, assured them everything looked normal and healthy. "First babies take their time," he told Nathan. "Do not expect a quick labor, but your wife is young and strong. She should do fine." "Should do fine" was not the reassurance Nathan wanted, and his anxiety only increased as Catherine's due date approached. He barely let her out of his sight, hovering so constantly that Katherine finally had to order him to go work in the fields before she lost her mind. "The baby will not come today," she said, laughing at his worried face. "And even if it does, I will call for you. Now go, before the cattle decide to break through that weak section of fence you have been meaning to fix." Reluctantly, Nathan went, though he returned to check on her every hour. Katherine spent the day doing light tasks, trying to ignore the occasional tightening of her belly that she suspected might be the beginning of something. That evening, as they were finishing dinner, Katherine's water broke. She gasped, looking down at the puddle forming beneath her chair, and Nathan went white. "It is time," he asked unnecessarily, already moving toward her. "It is time," Katherine confirmed, trying to stay calm even though her heart was racing. You need to go get Mrs. Morrison. The doctor's wife served as the town's midwife. I am not leaving you, Nathan said immediately. Nathan, I need her here. She knows what to do. You will have to ride fast. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear and determination. Mrs. Morrison arrived with her daughter, and they took over the bedroom, sending Nathan to boil water and fetch towels, basically keeping him busy so he would not pace a hole in the floor. Katherine labored through the night, gripping Mrs. Morrison's hands, breathing through contractions that felt like they might split her in two. Nathan ignored orders to stay out of the bedroom, kneeling beside the bed and letting Katherine crush his hand, whispering encouragement and love. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are so strong. I love you. I am here." As dawn broke over the ranch, filling the bedroom with soft light, Katherine gave one final desperate push and felt the baby slide free. A moment of silence and then a cry, strong and healthy, filled the room. "It is a boy, Mrs. Morrison announced, wrapping the baby in a clean blanket. "A fine, healthy boy." Katherine collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Nathan was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as Mrs. Morrison placed the baby in his arms. He looked down at his son with such awe, such love, that Katherine felt her heart might burst. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "Katherine, he is perfect," Mrs. Morrison helped deliver the afterbirth, and got Katherine cleaned up while Nathan sat beside the bed, still holding the baby, unable to look away. Finally, he carefully transferred the precious bundle to Katherine's arms, and she looked down into her son's face for the first time. The baby had Nathan's nose and Katherine's mouth, with a fuzz of dark hair and blue eyes that would probably change color eventually. His tiny hand wrapped around Katherine's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," Katherine murmured. "We have been waiting for you." "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, his hand gently touching the baby's head. They had discussed names but never decided definitively. Now, looking at her son, Katherine said, "What about David, after my father?" Nathan smiled. "David Riley, I like it. Welcome to the world, David." Mrs. Morrison and her daughter stayed until they were certain Katherine and the baby were doing well, then left with promises to check in again in a few days. Nathan, who had not slept in over 24 hours, refused to leave Katherine's side. He lay on the bed next to her, one arm carefully around her shoulders, both of them watching their son sleep in the cradle Nathan had built. "I cannot believe he is real," Nathan said softly. "I cannot believe we made him." "We have a family now," Katherine replied, her voice thick with emotion. "A real family, Nathan. The family I have always wanted," Nathan agreed. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything." "Thank you for finding me when I stepped off that stagecoach," Katherine said, "for seeing me when I felt invisible." Nathan kissed her temple gently. "You were never invisible. You were exactly what I had been waiting for without knowing it." The weeks after David's birth were exhausting but joyful. Katherine marveled at how completely her life had changed in less than a year. She had arrived in Riverside alone, rejected and terrified, with no idea what the future held. Now she was a wife and mother, living on a ranch with a man who loved her completely, caring for a child who depended on her for everything. Nathan was an attentive father, eagerly taking the baby whenever Katherine needed a break, walking the floor at night when David cried, changing diapers without complaint. He sang to his son in his rumbling voice, told him stories about the ranch, promised him adventures when he was older. As summer came and David grew bigger and more alert, Katherine felt her strength returning. She began taking on more of her old tasks, with David strapped to her back in a sling she had made, or sleeping in a basket she carried from place to place. Nathan worried she was doing too much, but Katherine laughed at his concern. Women have been raising babies while working for thousands of years, she reminded him. I am not made of glass. You are precious to me, Nathan insisted. Both of you are. I cannot help worrying. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset with David asleep between them in his basket, Katherine said, "Do you remember what today is?" Nathan thought for a moment, then smiled. 1 year since you stepped off the stagecoach. 1 year since my life fell apart, Katherine said. Or so I thought at the time. Now I look back and think it was the best thing that could have happened. If Gerald had kept his promise, I would be married to a man I did not love, living a life I did not want. I am glad he was an idiot, Nathan said, reaching for her hand. His loss was my gain. Do you ever think about how unlikely this all is? Katherine mused. That we found each other in the middle of Montana territory, that you happened to be staying at the hotel where I was working. That we both recognized something in each other. I think about it often, Nathan admitted. And I am grateful every single day. I spent so long being alone, convinced that was my fate. Then you appeared and everything changed. You gave me a reason to hope again, to dream about the future instead of just surviving the present. Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder. You gave me the same thing. You made me feel chosen when I felt rejected. You saw value in me when I felt worthless. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You were always lovable, Nathan said fiercely. Gerald Patterson was just too blind to see what he had. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, listening to the crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. David stirred and whimpered, and Katherine lifted him to nurse, marveling as always at the perfection of his tiny features. I want more of these, she said suddenly. More children, I mean. I want David to have siblings, to grow up in a house full of love and laughter like you said. Nathan's face lit up. Are you certain? Childbirth was so hard on you. It was worth it, Katherine said simply, and it will be worth it again. Then we will have more, Nathan agreed. As many as you want. The seasons turned and life on the ranch continued its rhythms. David grew from an infant to a toddler, taking his first steps, saying his first words. Nathan taught him to feed chickens and pet the horses gently. Katherine taught him songs and started reading to him from the growing collection of books Nathan ordered whenever they could afford it. When David was 2, Katherine became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was stronger from the physical work of ranch life. In the spring of 1879, she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Nathan's mother. Grace had Katherine's dark hair and Nathan's hazel green eyes, and she was a calm baby compared to David's fussy infancy. Nathan was smitten from the moment he held her, declaring that his daughter was the most beautiful child ever born. Katherine laughed at his bias but secretly agreed. With 2 children and a growing herd, the ranch was busier than ever. Nathan finally hired a young man named Thomas to help with the cattle, which took some of the burden off him. Thomas was 17, an orphan looking for honest work, and he proved to be reliable and hardworking. He bunked in the barn and ate meals with the family, becoming almost like a younger brother to Nathan. The ranch prospered. Nathan's careful management and hard work paid off as the cattle herd grew and beef prices stayed strong. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to afford occasional luxuries and save some money for the future. Katherine was happier than she had ever imagined possible. Her days were full of work and children and love. Nathan still surprised her with wildflowers, still held her at night and told her she was beautiful, still looked at her sometimes with such adoration it made her blush. Their physical relationship had matured into something deep and comfortable but no less passionate. They still desired each other, still came together with urgency and tenderness, still whispered words of love in the darkness. When David was 4 and Grace was 2, Katherine became pregnant for a third time. This pregnancy was harder, leaving her exhausted and sick for months. Nathan worried constantly, and even Dr. Morrison seemed concerned. "You are older now," the doctor said bluntly, "and this is your third child. Your body is tired. You need to rest more." Katherine tried to follow his advice, but rest was difficult with 2 young children and a ranch to run. Nathan took on as much as he could, and Thomas's wife, Martha, whom he had recently married, came to help with the children and housework. The community they had built, the friendships Katherine had formed with other ranch wives, proved invaluable during this difficult time. In the winter of 1881, Katherine went into labor 3 weeks earlier than expected. The baby, another boy they named James, was small but healthy. Nathan held his second son with the same wonder he had shown with David, the same protective love he felt for Grace. "Our family is complete," Katherine said, exhausted but content as she watched Nathan introduce James to his older siblings. "3 children," Nathan marveled. "When I think about how empty this house used to be, how lonely I was, and now look at it, full of noise and chaos and love." David, now a sturdy 4-year-old, climbed onto the bed carefully to peer at his new brother. "He is very small," he observed. "You were that small once," Katherine told him. "You will need to be gentle and help take care of him." "I will protect him," David declared seriously. "That is what big brothers do." Nathan caught Katherine's eye over their children's heads, his expression so full of love it made her throat tight. They had built something beautiful here, something that had started from rejection and loneliness and transformed into this, a family bound together by love and choice. The years passed quickly, as they tend to do when life is full. David grew tall and strong like his father, developing Nathan's quiet steadiness and love of the land. Grace was bright and curious, always asking questions, fascinated by everything from how bread rose to why the sky was blue. James was the wild one, fearless and adventurous, constantly giving his parents heart attacks with his climbing and exploring. Nathan expanded the ranch gradually, buying adjacent land when it became available, increasing the herd. He trained horses on the side, developing a reputation for his gentle methods and the quality of his animals. Katherine established a large garden and began selling her surplus vegetables and preserves in town, adding to the family income. They made improvements to the house, adding rooms for the children and eventually a separate parlor where Katherine's piano, purchased as a 10th anniversary gift from Nathan, held pride of place. On Sunday evenings, the family would gather in the parlor and sing together, Katherine playing while Nathan's deep voice and the children's higher ones blended in harmony. When David turned 16 in 1893, he began taking on more responsibility at the ranch, working alongside Nathan and Thomas, who was now the foreman. Grace, at 14, was turning into a beautiful young woman who wanted to be a teacher. She studied whenever she could, and Nathan and Katherine planned to send her to the teaching college in Helena when she was old enough. James, at 12, was still more interested in adventure than work, but he had a gift with horses that rivaled his father's. Katherine was 41 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined from years in the sun. But Nathan still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world, still reached for her hand whenever they sat together, still made love to her with the same passion and tenderness they had discovered in their wedding night. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, something they had done countless times over the years, Nathan said, "Do you ever regret it? Coming west, ending up here instead of going back to Philadelphia. Katherine turned to look at him, surprised by the question. Never. Not even for a moment. Why would you ask that? Nathan shrugged. I suppose sometimes I wonder if you would have been happier with an easier life, city comforts, less work, more culture. Katherine took his weathered hand in hers. I have everything I need right here. You, our children, this land, this life we have built together. I stepped off that stagecoach 17 years ago feeling like my life was over, like I had nothing left. But really, it was just beginning. You gave me everything, Nathan. You made me feel chosen when I felt rejected. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me the same, Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. I was so lost before you came, just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You brought light and life back to me. You made me remember how to hope, how to dream, how to love. They sat together in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. Their children's voices drifted from inside the house, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to wash dishes. Cattle lowed in the distance. A nighthawk called overhead. We have had a good life, Katherine said softly. The best life, Nathan agreed, and it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us, watching our children grow, maybe grandchildren someday. Grandchildren, Katherine laughed. I suppose we are getting to that age, are we not? David has been sweet on the Henderson girl for over a year now, Nathan observed. Would not surprise me if he proposes soon. And Grace will break a dozen hearts before she settles down, Katherine added. She is too smart and independent to marry young. She gets that from her mother, Nathan said fondly. As they sat there, Katherine reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her to this moment. If someone had told her, 17 years ago as she stood in the dust of Riverside feeling rejected and alone, that she would end up here, married to a lonely cowboy and raising 3 children on a Montana ranch, she would never have believed it. But life had surprised her in the best possible way. She thought about Gerald Patterson sometimes, wondered what had become of him. She bore him no ill will anymore. His rejection, which had felt so devastating at the time, had actually been a gift. It had freed her to find Nathan, to discover what real love was, to build this life she treasured. The lonely cowboy who had noticed her in the hotel dining room, who had seen past her shame and hurt to the woman beneath, had given her everything she had ever wanted without knowing it. Not the false promise of security and respectability that Gerald had offered, but something infinitely more valuable. True partnership, genuine love, and the sense of being chosen not out of convenience or necessity, but out of authentic affection and respect. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative expression. How grateful I am, Katherine replied, for all of it, the good and the bad, because it all led me here to you. Nathan lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I am the grateful one. You turned my house into a home, my loneliness into love. You gave me a reason to live instead of just survive. As darkness fell completely and the first stars appeared overhead, they finally went inside to their family, their home, their life. David and Grace had finished the dishes and were reading by lamplight. James was already in bed, exhausted from a day of riding. The house was warm and filled with the evidence of their life together. Children's drawings on the walls, books stacked on every surface, Katherine's sewing basket, Nathan's worn boots by the door. This was what happiness looked like, Katherine thought. Not grand or glamorous, but real and solid and true. She had traveled across a continent seeking something she could not quite name, and she had found it here in the arms of a lonely cowboy who had needed her as much as she needed him. Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. David did indeed marry Sarah Henderson, and they built a house on a portion of the ranch Nathan gave them as a wedding present. Grace went to teaching college and returned to Riverside to teach at the school, boarding with Mrs. Dalton, who was elderly now but still sharp as a tack. James, unable to settle down, spent several years exploring the West before finally returning to the ranch at 25, ready to put down roots. Nathan and Katherine became grandparents, first when David and Sarah had twin boys, then when James married and quickly had 3 children in rapid succession. Grace remained unmarried longer, focused on her career, but eventually fell in love with a banker from Helena and married at 32. The ranch continued to prosper under the combined efforts of Nathan, David, and James. It had grown from Nathan's original 75 acres to over 300, with a substantial herd and a thriving horse breeding operation. The original cabin had been expanded and modified so many times it was nearly unrecognizable, now a sprawling ranch house with room for the whole family when they gathered for holidays. Katherine watched her children become parents themselves and felt a deep satisfaction. She had given them what she never had, a stable, loving home with 2 parents who adored each other and them. She had broken the cycle of loss and loneliness that had defined her early life. Nathan grew older gracefully, his dark hair going silver, his face more lined but still handsome to Katherine. He moved a bit slower, complained about his back after long days, but he was still strong, still devoted to the land and the family they had built. On their 30th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Katherine looked around the table at her children and grandchildren, at the life she and Nathan had created, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Nathan and Katherine sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. Nathan pulled out a small box and handed it to Katherine. "What is this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it," Nathan said, smiling. Inside was a delicate gold locket. Katherine opened it to find a tiny photograph of the 2 of them from their wedding day, somehow preserved and reduced to fit the space. "Nathan," she breathed, "this is beautiful, but how did you get this photograph?" "I had it taken years ago and have been saving it for the right moment," Nathan explained. "I wanted you to have something that showed where we started, so you never forget the day we chose each other." Katherine's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the locket around her neck. "I could never forget. That day changed my life." "Mine too," Nathan agreed. He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles in the familiar gesture he had done countless times over the decades. "You know, I still remember the first time I saw you in that dining room. You looked so lost, so hurt, but also so determined to hold yourself together. I wanted to talk to you but had no idea what to say. I am not good with words." "You found the words when it mattered," Katherine reminded him. "You told me I was brave. You told me I was worth knowing." "Those words saved me, Nathan." "You saved me too," Nathan replied. "I was barely living before you came, just existing day after day with nothing to look forward to. You gave me everything." They sat together under the stars, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that had lasted 30 years and would last until their final days. The rejected mail-order bride and the lonely cowboy, bound together by choice and love, and the determination to make something beautiful out of lonely beginnings. As they finally went inside to bed, walking slowly through the house they had filled with love and life, Katherine thought about how strangely fate worked. She had come to Riverside expecting one future and found a completely different one. She had been rejected by a man she barely knew, only to be chosen by the right man, the one she was meant to find all along. Nathan had made her feel chosen every single day of their marriage. Chosen not because she was convenient or suitable, but because she was herself, because he loved her wholly and completely. That was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her, greater than the ranch or the children or the comfortable life they had built. The gift of being truly seen, truly valued, truly loved. And she had given him the same gift in return, seeing past his loneliness and reserve to the good man beneath, choosing him not because she needed rescuing, but because she genuinely loved who he was. They fell asleep that night as they had for 30 years, wrapped in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. True love, the kind that lasted, the kind that grew deeper with time rather than fading. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Katherine lost Mrs. Dalton when the old woman peacefully died in her sleep at 87. Nathan's old horse Belle died, and he grieved like he had lost a friend, which in many ways he had. But there were also celebrations. More grandchildren born, the ranch winning awards for their cattle, Grace's students achieving remarkable things. As Nathan and Katherine moved into their 60s, they gradually handed over more responsibility to their sons. David took over the cattle operation entirely, while James focused on the horses. Nathan still worked every day but at a slower pace, content to advise rather than lead. Katherine's joints ached now and she moved more carefully, but she still tended her garden, still cooked Sunday dinners for the family, still played piano in the evenings. She and Nathan took longer to do everything, but they did it together, still partners after all these years. One evening in the spring of 1906, 30 years almost to the day after Katherine had stepped off that stagecoach, they sat on the porch watching yet another sunset. Nathan was 72 now, Katherine 68. They had been married for 30 years, had built a legacy that would continue for generations. "You remember what you said to me that day by the river?" Nathan asked suddenly. "The first time we really talked," Katherine thought back across the decades. "I said you were not invisible to me." "And I said you were not invisible to me either," Nathan continued. "That is still true, you know. After 30 years I still see you. Every day, every moment. You are never invisible to me." Katherine leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture made awkward by the rocking chairs they sat in, but they managed. "You made me feel chosen when I felt rejected," she said softly. "You still make me feel chosen every single day." "Because you are chosen," Nathan replied. "You were always chosen from that first moment. My heart knew you before my mind caught up." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. 3 decades of love, of partnership, of choosing each other again and again through good times and bad. 3 decades of transformation from lonely, broken people to this, fulfilled and content and deeply loved. Their children had families of their own now. Their grandchildren were growing up strong and happy. The ranch thrived under David's management. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built, would continue after they were gone. They had created something lasting. But more than the physical legacy of land and family, they had created something intangible but perhaps more important. Proof that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that rejection could lead to something better, that loneliness did not have to be permanent. They had shown their children and grandchildren what real love looked like, the kind built on respect and partnership and genuine affection. As darkness fell and they finally rose to go inside, moving slowly but still hand in hand, Katherine felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had not gone according to plan. The man she had traveled across the country to marry had rejected her, leaving her alone in a strange town with no resources and no prospects. But that rejection had been the best thing that ever happened to her, because it had led her to Nathan. The lonely cowboy who had seen her when she felt invisible, who had chosen her when she felt rejected, who had loved her when she felt unlovable. He had given her everything she had ever wanted, not through grand gestures or wealth, but through simple, constant, devoted love. And she had given him the same in return. Two lonely souls who had found each other and built a life together, transforming their pain into purpose, their loneliness into love, their separate lives into one shared journey. That night, lying in bed with Nathan's arms around her as they had been for 30 years, Katherine whispered, "I love you. I will always love you." "I love you too," Nathan murmured back, his voice sleepy but content. "Forever, Katherine, forever." And as they drifted off to sleep, two elderly people who had once been young and heartbroken and alone, they knew with absolute certainty that they had found what everyone seeks: true, lasting, transformative love. The kind of love that turns rejection into blessing, loneliness into partnership, and two separate hearts into one shared life. The mail-order bride who had been rejected and alone had found her home. The lonely cowboy had found his companion. And together, they had found everything.